This is the new Sony FX3. It's part of their cinema line, and let me get this back on. I hate dust on the sensor. And it is a little beast. It's a full frame 4K cinema camera shooting at 422, 10-bit internally with 16-bit raw output. It also boasts the standard now silver hard casing, just like the FX6 and the FX9. It has an ISO range of 80 to 400,000, has full frame 422 at 120 frames per second at 4K, as well as 240 frames per second at full HD, 5-axis image stabilization, XLR input, flip LCD, and all of this for under 4,000 US. But specs are just specs. They're words on a sheet. The question is, can you actually shoot with this like a cinema camera? So I went and tested it. Here's what it does.
Mother lover, you gon' love this. Graduated from a rebel to a revolutionary in my area, they love this. I'ma wreck it like I'm revving the engine, heaven's ascension, every dimension, give me attention. Look at my soul, look at my heart, look at my hope. Got the world on my back, but I carry it though. Tell them God got my hand, I ain't letting it go. I got the juice now. I got the juice now. I got the juice now. I got the juice.
Now, I'm gonna tell you the things I do like with this camera, and then after that, I'm gonna do a couple of things I was a bit underwhelmed with. Let's talk first what separates this from other cameras. As you can see, it's essentially a mirrorless body with the flip LCD. It's like the FX6 with just the sensor. But this cool top handle on the top allows you to do XLR inputs. You actually can do 3 inputs of audio. I think the third one would be your audio jack right here. It's one of the first cameras I've seen where the manufacturer has added so many mounting points to the body. And this is important because most cinema cameras already have this, like a Red camera, or the FX9 and FX6. But mirrorless cameras, you always gotta add cages to them, and they always have an eyepiece, so it's difficult to build stuff up on it. But there is no eyepiece. Sony has really made this for cinematography first. This is for video. It actually does have the option for stills, but I haven't shot any photos on it, but it's great if you are doing location scouts. But this is a video cinema camera first. What also separates the FX3 from other cameras is just how good the low light is. And from what I understand, and that's because Sony puts most of the actual circuitry behind the sensor, behind where there actually are the individual pixels receiving the light. And this allows for a larger pixel, which a larger pixel allows for better dynamic range and better low light. So Sony has all the circuitry on the back side of their sensors. And that is why this camera is amazing at low light. I shot up all the way up to 400,000. It's weird actually saying that. And it does get a bit crazy up there at that high end. It's not really usable, but 12,800 is super clean. Almost everything I shot in the gym with Julian was at 12,800. And why this is so good, you might think that's kind of goofy having an ISO like that, is I lit that entire gym with just small little lights. A couple of the Nanlite tubes, a few of these little squares, the Falcon Eyes F7 light here. I lit the entire gym with just a couple little lights because this thing is so sensitive. It was so dark, it was strange looking out with my eyes and then seeing how bright it was on camera. I didn't have to bring in a big lighting package. I even had a big light at one point, and then when I realized how good this was in low light, I just got rid of it and used these little guys for the entire shoot. Now I know there's gonna be a lot of people, as we call them, measure baiters, who love the specs in cameras. They're gonna be really disappointed that this just has a 12 megapixel sensor, but there's a reason for that. When you have a higher density sensor, there is less room for light to hit each pixel on that sensor. That's why Sony went with a smaller megapixel sensor. Still shoots 4K video, but each pixel on there is much bigger and can receive more light. That's why this thing can shoot at 12,800 and it's super clean. Now be forewarned, this model, which is a pre-release model, when I was using it and I would use ISOs like 8,000 or 5,000 that are kind of in between the base ISO of 800 and 12,800, there was crazy noise, and I wouldn't suggest using any of those besides 800 and 12,800. Those two for me were the most clean ones. The XLR inputs too are a game changer in this body size. Being able to use pro audio or put on a shotgun mic like I had allows you to actually get professional sounding audio. And this is why I've always been a big proponent of using cameras like the FX9 or FX6 or C500, is they actually have XLR input, because then you can actually get good audio. I always find with mirrorless cameras, you're having to build them up so that they're kind of like a quasi cinema camera. But this right out of the box allows you to treat it like a filmmaker and not a stills camera that's trying to do video. And that's one other thing that really separates this from other mirrorless cameras. There's an internal fan in here that Sony promises that at any frame rate and at any resolution, you can continuously shoot with no overheating. Now there's no 8K in this, but you can shoot at 4K 120 frames, 422 10-bit, and there will be no overheating. They have made this for cinematographers, for people who have to go shoot a 4-hour interview in the sun and not have to worry about overheating. Again, your mirrorless camera you bought is not meant for video. It's trying to be, but this camera is designed for that. The autofocus on the FX3 is fantastic. It's what you're used to in most Sony cameras. Now the menu system on this. Guys, it's actually easy to use. Sony finally did it. They made a cinema camera with an easy menu that makes most sense most of the time. It's not like the FX9 menu system, which is the 7th lower level of hell. It's the last place you want to be on Earth, but they make you use it every time you want to change a frame rate or change a frame size. I'm not bitter. Another thing I loved about the camera is just how easy it is to handle, how easy it is to hold, how light it is, and also how well balanced this top handle is. If you guys have watched my channel for any amount of time, you'll hear me always talking about the importance of top handles. Get a top handle. Top handle. You need to get a top handle. And it's so nice seeing Sony integrate a top handle into their camera that is part of its ecosystem. Now, it's a bummer that there's no top button record here. While you're recording, you gotta kind of stick your hand under here and hit it. But as you can see here with shooting with Julian, I was able to just hang off stuff and chase him around while holding this with one hand and trusting the autofocus. It was super empowering as a filmmaker not to have to worry about my back getting tired after a whole day of shooting. Well, by the way, because of some technology that I really don't understand, the backside illuminated sensor, there is practically no rolling shutter in this camera that I've seen. You can see the shot with Julian. I'm whipping the camera as hard as I can. Just no jello. It's just straight up and down. It feels like a global shutter. This is really helpful. This is what makes this such a good like action camera, great for stuff like this video. Now this camera comes with S-Cinetone color, which has become Sony's standard cinema line, color science, which everyone loves and I think has made a lot of people transition from some other camera brands. I'm not gonna mention names. Now I'll get into it in another video, but there were some issues I found with the S-Cinetone. It might've been a pre-release camera, but the red channel got kind of crazy. But when I switched back over just to S-Log3 across the board for both gamma and the color science, that red craziness went away. You can see here where the red channel is kind of going crazy. There's lots of noise in it. It might just be a firmware upgrade that needs to happen. I don't know. We'll confirm soon. By the way, today's video is brought to you by me, The Art of Documentary. That's the academy that I launched back in September. We've had over 500 students in it who are crushing it in their filmmaking, getting their first films into film festivals, releasing films that they've dreamed of. So we're reopening the doors for that. If you want more information, there's a link below. We'll be launching that on March 8th. Back to the review. So what did I not like about this camera? Well, I already mentioned, the location of the record button is great, but what I would love to see is Sony come with a hand strap for the side of this if they're expecting us to always press that, because if you're right-handed like me, you kind of have to do this awkward reach or press it and then hold it. It's just a waste of time. Now, this isn't necessarily Sony's fault, but it's across all cameras. These flip LCD screens, the screens still suck. I always put on an extra monitor onto these cameras. I just hate shooting on a small LCD screen, especially when you're shooting S-Log, because then you can't tell where the exposure's at. You have to look at a tiny waveform. I would rather shoot with a LUT and monitor with false colors. But luckily there's a mounting point right here, so I just added my small HD on it. But overall, flip LCDs on any camera by any manufacturer, they just in general suck. It's just a really sad thing about cameras. I mean, our iPhone screens look great. Why can't we have a nice screen on our camera? It's not too much to ask for, or maybe it is. Now, my biggest beef with this camera is no time code. There's this big piece of real estate right here in the camera, and there's no timecode port. Now, I don't know if that's because they couldn't fit an SDI cable on this, but for me, it's difficult to want to call this a cinema camera when there is no timecode. But I think I'll forgive Sony in this case because I see what they're trying to do with the FX3. The FX6 is an amazing camera. It's quite honestly one of the most perfect cameras on the market, but it still might be too pricey for people who are just entering into filmmaking. And Sony is helping bridge that gap with cameras like the FX3. For you, you might think, why did they release the FX3 when they just released the FX6? Well, they're helping all levels of people in cinematography, in skill level, and also people with their pocketbook. I don't know if you've been around, but there has been a pandemic, and so people haven't been able to work as much. So cameras like this allow people to get into cinematography and filmmaking more affordably, and I really appreciate Sony for that. I won't fault them for putting out more options. Maybe it hurts your brain that there seems like there's too many cameras out there, but there's honestly probably the perfect camera out there for you, so I'm excited that this is out there. I just wish it had time code because it's gonna be difficult for me to want to integrate it into my workflow with our FX6 and our FX9, but I see what Sony's trying to do. So that is my review of the FX3. It's just my initial thoughts. I've only had a chance to shoot with it for a week, but I have been enjoying it. I wasn't sure what to expect. The FX6 just came out and I didn't really see a reason for the FX3, but after shooting in the gym with Julian all morning, I realized how handy this camera is to have, and for me, this would become a vlogging camera really easy. I think it's the camera I will replace my A7 III with, and this camera appeals more to me for video and film than the A7S III does, because it's still that like mirrorless camera trying to be a cinema camera, but there's just a few things about it that wouldn't work. I love when you wrap and it's 7:23 in the morning. We've been filming since 4. That's a great way to start the day. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think of this camera. If you're a Blackmagic user, I know you're probably not gonna want to replace it, but I think it's worthwhile to take a look. See you guys on the next one. Don't forget, Art of Documentary. We're reopening soon, so you wanna get on that wait list. Go check it out, and I'll see you guys on the next one.